Welcome to another episode of Expected Buffalo, the podcast. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather today, so you get glasses, Chad. I think this is the first time I'm letting the world see me. The people who watch this see me with glasses on because I just didn't feel like putting the contacts in today. So we'll push through. The show goes on, and we do have an interesting show tonight, depending how long we go here. I'm not going to promise it's going to be a long one again. But we are going to talk with Ryan Wilson here shortly about the Pittsburgh Penguins. And then we're going to get into the Sabres' hot start with their win over the Rangers and their upcoming schedule and the ludicrous, but still possible in some worlds, playoff push here if they do start to string some wins together, which they like to do that when things look the bleakest. But like I said, let's start with talking about the Penguins because they're an interesting team to me, not only with the little bit of trade connection they've had over the last few months, but also just what's going on there, what the plan is here with Crosby and how that team is trending, and who else better than to get Ryan Wilson here from the Hockey Buzz. Ryan, I really appreciate you joining us here, man.
Thank you for having me.
So let's get right to the meat here and start with maybe an easy question right off the top. What has gone wrong? So in my notes I sent you, I have a few things that I could think of: goaltending, age, depth. What is it in particular for you, though? Or maybe a few things that have really stood out with what has gone wrong for the Penguins, who are on track to miss the playoffs for the second straight season here?
I think it starts with goaltending. It's been a really wretched year for them. I think they're 28th overall in the league. If you watched this past weekend, their games, they couldn't get a save in either game. And their starting goalies, I think, at best had a 7 in front of their save percentage this weekend. So even I think they outshot the Rangers like 36-15 and lost 5-3. So the Tristan Jarry thing, Nedeljkovic, not really all that great this year. So it starts there, and it's one of those things that no matter what you do, even if you are a very good team, that it can sink you. And the Penguins, are not a very good team anymore. They're fine. I think they're a little better than perception, maybe. But the goaltending has been the number one hurdle. They just cannot get saves. Anytime they make pushes, it seems like the puck will go in their net from a weird angle. I want to say something like they've given up the first shot on goal in a game like 8 or 9 times this year. It's been like a crazy number. So they're, one shot in, they're trailing and they're up against it. So, I would lead with goaltending, but they're certainly, as you put down here, depth, not the greatest. They don't have very good scoring depth, and they're leaning in on mid-30s players and up. So it's kind of what they're doing right now.
So I'm going to ask you about the goaltending because we talked a little bit about it before we started going here. And as I told you, with the Husso trade to Anaheim, I thought, well, maybe is there a Gibson thing coming here? And immediately him being from Pittsburgh, I went to, well, maybe the Penguins are, maybe this season might be over for them. And here I am. I'm going to talk about when you go off, maybe the Sabres can make a run, but whatever. Maybe like the Penguins season might be over, but still, I think they're going to try to push with Crosby. We'll talk about that in a minute here. Maybe a good segue. But I'm just curious your overall thought on the idea of Gibson and the connection there. Do you think that's something like that they'd realistically do, or would you be a fan of it? I'm just kind of curious. Like you gave me a little bit of insight, but I'm a little more in depth of what you think about that.
Well, the Pittsburgh connection's always been there because that's where Gibson's from.
Right.
He is playing better this year. He had like a 3 or 4 year stretch where I think his reputation preceded itself a little bit, where he wasn't actually, being a quality goaltender for a couple of those years. The Penguins have Joe Blomqvist, and they have another prospect they drafted, Sergei Miroshov, who just went to the AHL, 6-0, like a .934 save percentage. But the issue being Jarry's there in the AHL, and when Blomqvist is down, they don't have enough starts to go around. So they've had Miroshov in the ECHL. So I think they're looking for Blomqvist to kind of step up a little bit there. I don't know if they'll be making a big splash in goal. I haven't really seen anything tangible in the places I usually look for a goalie thing. But as you know, goaltending, it's a weird position. Dubas, I don't think has a superb history with finding goaltenders in Toronto, and then his first move here was to give Jari that 5-year contract. So I wouldn't rule out a Gibson thing because I don't think maybe Dubas has a good pulse on that position.
Fair enough.
It's not something I would do because Gibson's 30 already.
Yeah, I think so. If not over that, I think he might just be 30. Using the Google machine right now.
He's in that neighborhood, and he's still got a few years.
Yeah, 31 left. Actually. He turns 32 in July.
So I think a lot of the Gibson conversation is like maybe people think he's 27. So that would be a pass for me, even though I know like their current situation is not great. I would hope that those two younger guys could push a little bit. Maybe one of them can earn a spot. And you get like that Nedeljkovic tier goalie, maybe not him anymore, but
yeah,
somebody comes in that, gives them all they need is average goaltending.
Right. I mean, maybe we say the same thing here, man. We just give us average and we can try to make the rest around it work. I mean, that's really what you asked for. Okay. So off of that, like I said, to push into the next part of the conversation, I want to go. I'm curious. Maybe you have different thoughts. Maybe you can give it to me what you think the Penguins think, maybe what you think, what the plan forward is here. Crosby re-signed that contract for a couple more years. There's been talk about Dubas want to do a quick reset here, but there's Malkin and Letang still around. So kind of putting all that together. Maybe you and the Penguins are in the same spot. Maybe you think you two are different, what you would do, what they want to do. Just kind of curious about the overall plan there with them.
It's a rebuild with some window dressing.
Okay.
If you look at the moves they've been making, they traded Eller away. They traded Pettersson away. They took on Hayes for a second-round pick. I believe the Penguins have the most first, second, third round draft picks the next 3 years. They have like 15 of them. So they are quietly building up a pool of draft picks. And yes, Crosby, Malkin, and Letang are still there. I believe they've earned the right to choose to be there when you talk about their legacies. And I think they set the record for longest running teammates. They're at 17 or 18 years now. They want to go out as Penguins. Okay. And I don't think it's lost on them what kind of situation they're in right now.
Yeah.
And I think when the team traded for Karlsson, they really wanted to make a go of it that year. And it just didn't work out. And the Karlsson trade hasn't maybe worked quite the way they've wanted it to, but it was also a classic, we'll trade you all our bad players for this good one. Yeah. So it's really not that big of a deal. They might be looking to move him moving forward. I think his performance at the Four Nations shows that if you give him a surrounding cast, he's still pretty darn good hockey player. I think Dom Luszczyszyn's game scores, I think he was the top skater in the round robin.
Karlsson, I think I saw that. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
So they do have those top end guys that are aging out, but the focus is on the future, and there's going to be nuance. Is it going to be a reset, a retool, a rebuild, however you want to define it? No longer will they be spending their futures for short-term fixes. So they may trade some of these veteran players for draft picks, or they may trade some of these draft picks for an RFA aged kind of player that has years left in team control. They may make a splash with that 23 to 25-year-old player with the amount of draft picks they have. What that is at the moment, no idea. But they are starting to build up the draft capital that they've been lacking for 10 years, something like that.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy. I remember they'd always roll through Buffalo in those like prospects challenge, and you're like, this is just the AHL team. Like, there's no prospects here. There's maybe one or two, and Yeah, it makes sense. I didn't know they had that many picks though, so that's interesting because they do have a ton of picks over the next 2 years.
Yeah, they've been stockpiling some, and I assume they'll trade Matt Grzelcyk, who apparently setting career highs in assist or points. I can't remember which. He's been quarterbacking their power play. Anthony Beauvillier was on pace to be near his career high in goals. He's conveniently on Sid's line right now, right before the trade deadline.
Yeah,
So not that they'll catch like huge hauls, but I think they are looking to, get futures. And it's a new day in Pittsburgh when you're talking about that, because it used to be the other way around.
So before we get into the trade deadline stuff, I do want to circle back really quick on Mike Sullivan. So there were some rumors last year that he might not survive that. Looking at another year of probably missing the playoffs again. He's been there for a long time. These veteran guys know him. He was just the coach of Team USA's, but so that's reputation there. But is he? I think he just signed a new contract, right? So is he still pretty firmly set there?
I think this is year one of the extension.
5 years, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So if you wanted to get rid of him, 2021 or something around then, when they were still pushing as a competitive force, would have been the time to make that change. Now it's kind of pointless.
Okay.
Like, they are what they are. Like, what are you going to bring in a new coach with what in mind to win? Mike Sullivan is a good, very good coach. I think he had a good showing at the Four Nations. He is going to be the U.S. Olympic coach. I don't think the Penguins are going to fire the Olympic U.S. coach during the run up to the Olympics. And Fenway Sports Group loves him. He was part of the hiring process of Kyle Dubas. They have him. I think he's in this weird little zone of, he's kind of above a head coach, but not quite management kind of deal. That's the kind of respect that he's had. And most importantly, who do you think likes him a lot that would keep him there? None other than Sid. So if Sid wants him as the coach and he signed on for those 2 years when he could have gone anywhere, it's just one of those things where I think you're just like, well, okay, he can coach this team. Now, I don't even know if this is legal, but the exception I would have to this would be, I don't know if you can trade coaches anymore.
It's a good. I feel like I've heard it wasn't Brendan or something like there was a trade idea at some point. So it's
if someone wants to give him a first round pick, sure. Otherwise, I don't know what that gets the team, because they are like, they're owning this path of rebuilds, and I don't think that it's gonna move any needles.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay. So let's switch to the deadline stuff at the end here, because that'll interest some of the Sabres people. Well, maybe one or two of these guys will. So we talked about Karlsson a little bit, so I guess maybe we'll start there. He's the biggest name on this list here. Full no move clause, $10 million. That's a boatload. But you could get a maybe decent. I think you can still get a decent return. But I don't know. The problem is, I think in season is where you're going to find somebody to take the $10 million, and then I guess you could eat some of it for Pittsburgh, but that's probably be a big chunk to eat.
I don't think they'll be eating any of that, to be honest. The $10 million, of course, big cap hit. He's probably more of an off season, maybe draft, if they were to even do it.
Yeah.
But as far as like the Sabres connection and Karlsson, I think Karlsson Dahlin would be a pretty cool pairing, to be honest. He's still good. The trade may not have looked as great in hindsight with what's transpired in Pittsburgh, but he's still really good player. And I was looking up, just some of his background leading up to this deadline. He's got a 1.48 5-on-5 points per 60 as a defenseman. That's 8th best in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And the other guys in that neighborhood are Hughes, Werenski, Dahlin, Makar, Fox, Power, Byram. So some Sabres there. You'd have the best offensive back end if you got Karlsson.
Yeah, far. Defense might be a problem besides Dahlin, but they'd score a lot of goals still. Yes.
It is an entertainment product. So, and as a Penguins fan, the when they've had their best success, it's been kind of a rock and roll, let's score as many goals as possible type of deal, and it's fun. That's fun hockey to watch.
All right, let's go to the guy that I'm most interested in. So I've been following the reports out of Pittsburgh for about Rickard Rakell. So it seemed like maybe like a month or so ago, it was like he's probably not moving. And then as of a couple of weeks ago, he's probably not moving. But if somebody wants to pay something you really can't say no to, a pretty good price, then maybe he could move. He had I don't know, I guess you could say a rough year last year. He's playing pretty well this year. 31 years old, still has what? Let's see, 3 years left at $5 million on his contract. What do you think ends up happening there with him? Because if they want to get futures, I feel like that's a good player, especially if you're Pittsburgh, you're like, well, he's having a good year, but is that going to continue? They want to cash on value now. But I know he plays with Crosby a lot, I think I read. So I'm kind of just curious what the general vibe is on him.
So last year was disappointing from like a regular stat standpoint, but I don't think he was hurt a little bit last year too. He had an injury. He missed maybe as high up as a month, so he's a little bit dinged up. But I don't think he's all that different of a player than he was last year or even the year prior. I think what we're talking about here is a 16.4% shooting percentage this year, and last year it was 9. So when you're looking at like what changed, I think that's the obvious one there. I think he is. I've actually liked him quite a bit since coming over. He's a nice complementary piece to a quality center. He's grown a little bit playing with Sid, like as far as finding more soft spots and being more assertive on when he goes and that kind of stuff. He's a really good passer, and he's been finishing great this year. So he is a really good player. I do think they should cash in on him because of, the shooting percentage perception. You know how that goes.
Yes, of course.
So what I've heard is, if another team wants to meet this higher cost, I think they're willing to move him. What that is, I don't know. I think if you got a first round pick as a starting point, you'd have my ears on that and whatever came from that. Adding a piece back and forth or whatever.
So let me throw an idea out here. Not many ideas, but kind of just spitballing back and forth. So I have in my head the random Friedman mention in his 32 thoughts or whatever number of thoughts he did at the time about just out of nowhere. He mentioned it one time and then never again about the Pittsburgh and Sabres connection, that the Penguins might be interested or are interested in some of their, almost NHL ready prospects. So then I get to guys like Konsta Helenius, maybe Isak Rosen, but I don't. Maybe his value is a little bit dropped. Then in the NHL level, well, does that include Jack Quinn, perhaps? But do you think let's say for me, where I'm in Buffalo, I'm like, I feel like if they throw Helenius on the table, a guy who was picked in the top 10 just last year, or maybe no, it was like 11th or whatever. Maybe that gets their attention or starts a conversation. But do you think they'd be more interested in the actual draft pick than a prospect, unless they really like the player, than a prospect itself?
I don't think Dubas would be against a prospect at all.
Okay.
Because if you look at the Gensel trade, that's really what the bulk of what he got back were prospects. You can, go back and forth on what your opinion is of those prospects. But when you said rebuild, retool, reset, I think it all depends on what these kind of trades look like. And I think he might be looking for close to NHL ready players. And if they take that leap and they make no money at all, well, the Penguins have right now, before any trades next year, looking at about $25 million in cap space. It might be a reset. Sid's still pretty good.
Yeah, right. Yep.
And I bet he's going to be good for a few more years. So I do think that would be a good example of what they might look at. It might not be your classic, oh, well, we just want a first round pick. I think Dubas is willing to play ball with prospects and load those up. And that would fit with what he's done so far. Even smaller trades or acquisitions he's made, like Cody Glass and Philip Tomasinu, he's taking these swings at that age bracket. And I think that would be something he would look at.
Interesting. The last guy I'm going to ask you about, only reason I'm asking is because there was some Sabres connection early in the year. I haven't heard much since, but What's your feeling on Michael Bunting? I think he's another one that maybe could make some sense for the Sabres. Again, there's a little bit of connection. Haven't heard a lot in a while, but kind of curious if you're feeling on the player.
When he first showed up, played great. Like shot out of a cannon, looked really good at the end of last year, even though it was kind of a lost cause at that point.
Yeah.
I think the team was pretty down on moving Jake. I'm still pretty down on moving Jake because he's one of my personal favorites. But with Bunting this year, he's kind of been a power play merchant.
Okay. Sabres could use that though.
Okay, so if you have a role for that power play, 9 of his 14 goals have come on the power play down low. And if you're looking for even strength scoring, he has a 1.00 points per 60 at even strength, which, points per 60 might not be everything, but being 1.00, getting top 6 minutes with like someone like Malkin, probably not where you want to be. So if you need a little bit of power play help, I think it might be something to think about. If you're looking to find some depth scoring, perhaps maybe not. And I know Malkin's shown his age a little bit for the first time ever this year, but he's still decent enough where you shouldn't be at 1.0. So that's kind of where I am with him.
Very good. Very good. Appreciate that. All right, Ryan. Well, I'm out of questions. So what I do at the end here, I'll give you, how much time you need to self-promote if you got anything going on with what you're working on.
Still doing the Penguins articles at hockeybuzz.com. I do have the Hockey Hurts podcast, but that schedule has been, kind of in and out the last couple of years with how busy things get with the kids and stuff like that.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
So those are the main two: Hockey Buzz, Hockey Hurts. And thank you very much for having me.
All right, Ryan, I appreciate it. Appreciate the insight, man. And if something does happen with the Sabres and Penguins, then I'll definitely get you back on here.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, man. Have a good night.
You too. Thanks.
All right, Ryan Wilson from Hockey Buzz. A lot of good insight in the Penguins there. Really enjoyed that conversation. Especially the Raquel piece that caught my attention because he's one of the guys that I think are a focus for me that makes the most sense for the Sabres. I think a good fit. I know he's 31 years old, but I still think there's a good player there. It's a middle six, a second Zucker trade if you want, that has some term though, maybe a little bit better than Zucker too in some aspects. So we'll watch how that goes at the deadline approaches. I know I've mentioned the Hellenius thing a few times. I know some people don't really love it, but at the same time, you got 100 prospects, like move one for something. It's okay. This can be a different, older player version, I guess you could say, of the Ryan McLeod trade if they do want to do that. All right, we'll move to segment 2 here, as we call it in the biz or on this particular podcast. We're going to get a little bit more Sabres focused here, what we have upcoming in the most recent game. So 8-2 win over the New York Rangers to kick things off on Saturday. I felt like going into that game, it was either going to be they were going to start really hot or they were going to be really rusty, nowhere in the middle. And we got the really hot game. So 5-0 coming out of the gate, all over the ice offensively. And that was good, encouraging to see for a roster that is fully healthy for the first time. That lasted about 45 minutes. We'll get to that in a little bit here, the injury part of it. But yeah, encouraging. This is still a team that's in last place in the Eastern Conference, of course. And Lindy Ruff, is talking about they have to get 7 to 10 over the next how many ever stretches, every single 5-game stretch throughout the season. Difficult to ask. Of course, not impossible. It can be done, but it's a long shot. With this team that, hasn't been able to find consistency, that's a difficult ask. And what probably ends up happening, honestly, is I think, if they stay healthy here, they'll win. I think they'll have a really good end to their season because I just don't think that this team is as bad as the record says. Some of their underlying numbers, really, as you kind of go along here since the middle of December, have actually been pretty impressive, especially offensively at 5-on-5. Their defense has kind of remained stagnant at, ish. But I think it's a better team than what we've seen and what the record indicates. This roster is not the worst roster in the Eastern Conference. So I think we're going to see them climb a little bit here. Does that mean that impacts your draft position? Probably. But at the end of the day, it's, whatever. I mean, I just don't think they're going to end up in a spot where they're going to be in a top 5 pick. The lottery, probably doesn't really help them. They're not going to be worse enough to be one of the bottom 2 teams in the league. And then beyond that, you're in that, that 3 to 5 range where still you can get a good player, but, I don't think it's anything worth tanking your team over, if you will, or kind of just trading at trade guys to, deflate this team. I don't think that's really what they're going to be looking for or what they're going to be doing here over the next 2 weeks. So one thing that I did want to get to when I was talking about that Rangers win is the Cousins-Quinn line. Well, Cousins-Quinn Greenway line. And the reason is because last podcast, if you listened, I talked a lot about how that line looked, particularly Greenway and Cousins, how they played last year. And the numbers behind that when they were away from Thompson, if you don't remember, if you didn't listen, were not very good. They were pretty poor, actually. Well, as I mentioned when I was going through it, that doesn't mean it has to be the same way this year. There's a new coach. Greenway's playing, I think, a little bit better than he was last year. And maybe it works as somebody who's a different kind of mix-up and a defensive, upgrade to help Cousins and Quinn to not the better defensive players on this team. But game one, it went pretty well. And we saw the impact right out of the gate when Quinn scored the first goal. Greenway, on a back check in the offensive zone, strips the puck. Quinn gets it, comes up the ice, and, flubs a shot, but tricks Shesterkin, gets a 5-hole, and the Sabres are on the way from there. He made a nice play, and I think it was the Thompson goal too. So really, Greenway has had an immediate impact, and it's going to be interesting to see where this goes over the next 2 weeks here, because we have a guy here that's missed a lot of this season, but when he has played for them, he has been excellent. He has fit his role. He has been impactful. But really, what does that mean? How much of that do they take as serious? Is he a guy that they're going to extend along with Zucker, or is it just Greenway or Zucker? They have to make a decision on that. I don't really know where they stand on that one overall. But to me, it's an interesting conversation on what you really want to do there with a player that fits the role. He brings a bigger size to your team that you don't really have a lot of throughout your lineup. So that, I think, is a factor too, versus what you would get. And I think what we would get in the open market is the mystery. Do teams see how he has played this season and in the limited, 30 or so games that he's played and think, well, that's a player that can help me? I always saw him a fit as a Western Conference guy. I think the way he plays the game really fits in that conference. A team in the East might want to bring him in, though, also, to bring that physicality in the middle of their lineup and what he does defensively and out of the penalty kill. That is really important pieces for a playoff team. Or are they going to look at, this is a guy that has been injured a lot, doesn't play a lot, and as such, we're not going to pay a premium. And what's a premium? Getting your second round pick back that you paid, I guess, what I classify as a premium. I think you're looking at best probably a third rounder, because I do think that injury history plays into it more than I would like it to. But at the same time, you never know. It takes one team to get, a little bit desperate. They miss out on some other things. They really want a guy with size, that body, and they bring him in. And maybe you get that second round pick, or maybe you get that third that goes to a conditional second if you, get to a certain point in the playoffs. I think that's a possibility here too with Greenway. But good for him. Going into a contract year, really stepped up. Has really played well. So full marks to him, and his impact immediately showed. And hopefully he can stay healthy. If he does stay with the Sabres, beyond the deadline here. So, and then we get into the summer and we see how that goes from a contract standpoint. All right. The unfortunate part of a pretty decent win over the weekend is it cost you 2 players. So Tuch and Zucker both caught injuries in that game. They did not practice today. Tuch seemed like the more alarming one, if you will. He got hit weird in the corner, and then was down for a little bit. It looked to be really bad, and then he got up and skated off on his own. So maybe it's not as bad as it looked on the ice, it seems. But I think there's a possibility that he misses a game or two. We'll see. Ruff said they're both going to take the game, take a game day skate and see how they feel, and then they'll go from there. Tuch, I could see missing. Zucker, I don't know why I just have this feeling that I think he'll be okay, depending on how all this shakes out and the testing that they were doing, where that goes. But I don't. I think he'll be okay. Maybe misses a game, but we'll see. But if I had my money on it, I could see Zucker playing tomorrow, but Tuch not. And then maybe Tuch for the next game in Carolina is where you could see him jump back in the lineup, or maybe for the home and home against Montreal after that. But we'll see. I mean, I think losing Tuch out of your lineup is always a big deal for them. It impacts them, and also the thing too that's unfortunate is when Tuch gets injured, the game dips. I mean, it is most injured guys, but really it kind of it goes for a couple week stretch, even if he starts to feel better. So that's unfortunate because I think he's having a really good year for them. But maybe he comes back and he's fine and he's on his way, and that's what you can, hope for. The Zucker part of it, too, going back to him, that makes this a bigger conversation is, again, the deadline. He's a piece that could be considered to be moved. We know that both sides, Zucker and the Sabres, would like him to stay in Buffalo. It's been pretty quiet on a contract. We know that Adams sat down with him based on what he said. We know that Adams met with the agent when they were on the West Coast a couple of weeks ago. So it's been quiet there. Perhaps they're working away, they're grinding away at something. If they feel like they're close or they can get something done, I could see a possibility where he remains on the team even without an extension, because the two sides feel like they can work towards getting something done. And, once the deadline passes, then your next deadline is essentially the middle or end of June. So that gives it a little more time to work things out. And the same thing can be said for Greenway as well in terms of the contract conversation. All right. I don't really think there's a lot of the places want to go. Also, the headache is starting to come back. So maybe we'll kind of wind down into our schedule here over the next few games. So I think that is what is going to make things interesting for this team. So tomorrow night they host the Ducks. Then they travel to Carolina, then a home and home with the Canadiens, and then home against the Sharks over your next 5 games. At the very least, if you want to be serious about this, you're going to need 4 out of 5 there, I would say. Getting both games in a home and home is tough. Maybe you get a split, or maybe you get 3 out of 4 in that stretch. That's what I would look for. They never play well in Carolina. That is always a tough game for them, no matter how good or poor the Hurricanes are playing. So, again, that could be a tough one for them. But really, I mean, the home Ducks, home Sharks are non-negotiables. You have to win both those games. Probably the home Montreal game is also a non-negotiable. You got to get those 3. And then it's the game in Montreal or the game in Carolina. You got to get one of those. Or at least a point out of one of those games. And I think that keeps the momentum going of thinking that this 7 out of 10 plan is a real possibility. If you blow a game to Anaheim and then you go a poor performance in Carolina and then you split with Montreal, I mean, it's kind of like we're kind of done here before we even get to the deadline. I mean, they're already done for all sense and purposes, but really even that 7 and 10 plan is kind of cooked at that point as well. So, yeah, we'll see how that goes. I'm interested to see the Ducks. I like to watch them play. They have some interesting players. There will be no Trevor Zegras. He was suspended for the hit on Michael Rasmussen, so he is out tomorrow. He was suspended for 3 games. So no Trevor Zegras. If you want to make the joke about helping Buffalo or Anaheim in that regard, feel free. I'm one who did make that joke last night, so that is open to be made there if you would like to do that. All right, so that is probably it for me tonight. The one thing I did want to mention at the end here, I'm not going to be sappy or anything because there's no need for that, but March, Expect the Buffalo turns 5 years old. It is our 5th year anniversary, which is pretty crazy that it has already gone 5 years. We've been doing this for Expected Buffalo. Anthony, Eddie, great partners in getting the site to continually grow year over year. All of your support, there's 671 people watching this right now, which is kind of crazy. But all the support of all the listeners, subscribers, not subscribers, podcast viewers, However you consume our content, from just a couple guys who like hockey, cover the Buffalo Sabres, and are a little bit nerdy about numbers, having that support there, is great, is awesome. And we're going to have some fun in March. A few announcements on some things that are going to be happening with the site, including the one tease I'll give you is we might be getting a new look. So stay tuned for that, how that goes. Wink, wink. And then the last thing I wanted to do is give back. Like I said, I really appreciate the support everybody has given us, and I really want to give people an opportunity to see what we're all about, to maybe understand the numbers part of the game that we do focus on. Again, not entirely, but of course that's what we're known for. So there's that part of it. There's also our excellent Discord that we have. I think of over 300 people that we have in it. If you're somebody who's looking for a different avenue to talk hockey, I think our Discord itself speaks volumes. And it's not only Sabres talk. We talk about the league. We talk about draft. We talk about the AHL team. We talk about the Bandits in there. We talk about the Bills and NFL and the NHL in general. There's food. There's music. There's tons of stuff that we get into in there. It's an awesome group. Everybody gets along. We do the everybody love everybody feeling in there. But really, we don't even have to have any of those conversations in the 2 years I've been having the Discord. There's been no issues ever. Just a bunch of people enjoying talking sports. And it's a really, I think, good area. Anybody who's in it, you can ask them. They'll definitely recommend it to you. So, saying all of that, it's live right now. We have a promotion going on through the entire month of March to celebrate our 5-year anniversary. We are giving 50% off of a 1-year membership to the site using the code up on the screen there. And if you're a podcast listener, XB5XB, and then 5 spelled out FIBE. You can go to the site, use that code, have 50% off the entire month of March. That promo will be going, so don't got to run into it right now. So we'll have that going for a while. Or if you want to run into it right now, feel free, because it's going to get fun here over the next few weeks. And I love deadline time. This is probably the last podcast that we're really going to. We'll always be Sabres focused, but we'll get into more trade stuff here as we go into Wednesday, into our mailbag Thursday, and then into next week being deadline week. Really, the week before the deadline is where you see a lot of trades. So I think we're going to start to see some action around the league. And then we'll see if Kevin Adams, for the second year in a row, wants to pull something off to help his team now or in the future, or if he's just going to continue to sit there as he's done the entire season and do nothing. So let's hope that we see some impact there and something we could talk about, a trade beyond just selling pieces off. I hope that's not all we get. But we'll see. You never know. You never know. It's a fun time of the year. Dreams do run wild in your head until they're crushed at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, because it goes a little bit longer on March 7th. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Again, thank you for all the support over 5 years. We're really hitting the next level here as a site and what we want to do. So thank you very much for all that again from the bottom of my heart. Also from Anthony and Eddie speaking on their behalf as well. Thank you again. And we will talk again on Wednesday. Unless something happens, of course. This is the time of the year where if something happens, I'll be right back here talking to you again. But the plan right now is we will talk again on Wednesday after the Sabres game tomorrow. So thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll talk to you then. See ya.